Welcome to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy, where Sunday's sermon sparks Wednesday's conversation. Each week, they sit down to dive deeper, reflect thoughtfully, and wrestle with the themes of this week's message. Their goal is to explore faith more fully, ask the hard questions, and invite you into a dialogue that goes beyond the pulpit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the podcast. I'm Pastor Randy Moore.
And I'm Pastor Andy Payton.
It's Advent season, that time of preparation for Christmas. We've been dealing with that now for a couple of weeks. And here at Methodist Temple, this year, our particular focus has been Advent as a season of healing.
Yeah, I mean, it's building on this idea that Advent is, like you said, preparation, but it's also a sense of longing. I like that word, longing. The lessons that are in the Common Lectionary point to this idea of longing, this idea of wanting to be healed. We all have areas in our life where we long to be healed. We long for a Savior. And so you have to get a sense of that to prepare our hearts for Christmas. And that's kind of the idea of our series. And so we've talked about healing relationships. We've talked about healing in terms of our identity. And this last week, our theme was healing in terms of our weary bodies. And of course, we lit the candle joy. What does joy and weariness have to do with one another? Well, we're never going to find the joy that we're longing for in our lives unless we find some rest too. And so,
if we're going to talk about healing, I think we have to do a bit of a corrective, because I think what we've done in the church is we've separated body and soul, or body and spirit. The body is just the shell, the spirit's what's important, spirit good, body bad. But that's not Christian. And to talk about bodily health is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, there is a tendency within Christianity to think of salvation as an otherworldly type of event. Like, salvation's all about what happens after you die. Well, not necessarily. No. I mean, if you look at Jesus's life as our prime example, he spends a lot of time healing people's physical bodies, helping people with some of their challenging questions, things that are happening in real life. He's feeding people. These are all bodily types of functions that he's trying to help folks with.
And we all know by experience, don't we, that if our bodies are hurting, our spirits are hurting.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yet, we do have this disconnect between the two. There's an early church heresy, I'm sure you've heard of it, called Gnosticism,
right?
Which the way Gnosticism, and I'm just going to paraphrase here, works is the Gnostics say body bad,
right.
Physical body bad,
right.
Spirit good. And so there's this huge disconnect. That's a heresy.
Right.
So that's not Christianity. You know, there's people that believe that, and that's their choice, but that's not how we as Christians have typically thought of things when it comes to the gospel.
Yeah, if we're incarnational, the body's important.
Yeah, if God goes to all the trouble to become a person, then it's telling us something on a very basic level. Body is important. Body is good.
We could start a whole new podcast on Paul's idea of the resurrection body. But there is a resurrection, according to Paul, there is a resurrection body.
Spiritual body is the language he uses. Yeah. So the language that I like to use when thinking about this, taking care of our body, taking care of ourselves, actually does come from Paul. One of my favorite chapters in all the New Testament, Randy, is in Colossians chapter 3. And it really is the biblical basis for what we do here on a Sunday morning, typically, where there's a point in the worship service where we look at one another and we say, hey, I see Christ in you. So we affirm the sacred value of one another. And over the years, people have kind of challenged that, like, well, I'm not sure about that idea. I'm not sure Christ is in me. And I think fundamentally the problem is we feel like we're just so ordinary. How can something so holy be a part of us? And yet, I think the New Testament is very clear that Christ very much is a part of us. Anyway, the lesson comes from Colossians 3, verses 3 and 4. It is the basis of this idea of I see Christ in you. And I'll just read it. Paul says, your life is hidden with Christ in God. This is Colossians 3, verse 3. And then verse 4. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you will be revealed with him in glory. Let me read that one more time. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, you'll be like him in glory. So what's Paul saying? Well, I don't think Paul is what we call a pantheist. That's the technical phrase for pantheists believe everything is God. So they equate like this physical world is God. I think to use a technical term would be, I think what Paul's talking about here is panentheism. And so what does that mean? Well, God is within all things, no brainer, of course. God's omnipresent, but yet God is more than all things too. And so on a practical level, Randy, when I look at this verse, what I hear Paul saying is that my life, your life is hidden with Christ in God. So our life is participating in the greater life of God's presence that we know in Jesus Christ. And if that's true, then how we treat our physical bodies matters.
Yeah, there's a difference. There's clearly a difference between Jesus Christ and us. However, I think it's not stretching it too far to include us in the incarnation, that God is not only incarnate in Christ, God is somehow incarnate in us. Is that going too far?
No, I don't think so at all.
I don't either. And some people may say, whoa.
Yeah. Well, go back to the creation accounts themselves. In the creation accounts, God takes dust from the ground, breathes into the dust the very breath of life. The very word that's used there, it kind of hints at this idea that life, our life, your life is emanating from a greater life. There's like you said, a distinction between the two. You know, we have our own personalities, we have our own choices. Mm-hmm. We're participating, but yet deeply connected to this greater life as well. We're emanating from the source of God's presence. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, let's bring it back to bodily health and bodily healing, because we've made the point the body is important, and I really do believe that that's a corrective that a lot of Christians need to really take hold of and own. And so it does some mundane things aren't all that mundane. They're important, and we've laid out some questions for reflection and that we use with our people.
Yeah.
And what do we do with those? The first question is, where in my life do I feel most weary right now? And how might God be inviting me to slow down and receive healing? Mm. Yeah. Just knowing that there's an invitation is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, as I think about that question today, Randy, I think one place in my own life would be the weariness that I experience sometimes is connected with a need for affirmation, constant need for affirmation. One of the ways I know that I'm out of tune with God's love and God's presence is that you're needy for affirmation. And I mean, I know that's kind of deep and that's pretty vulnerable on my end, but I'm just being honest. And as pastors, we can certainly get on the treadmill of living for the applause, that kind of thinking. Yeah.
Nice sermon, Pastor Andy. Oh yeah, what was nice about it?
Yeah,
tell me more.
What did you like? What'd you like? Yeah. So needy, and so I just feel like when I'm coming, it's not bad to have like praise or someone say, "Hey, good job." I mean, that's fine. But if you are living your life, if I'm living my life in such a way where you need that, I feel like that leads to a weariness of spirit, a weariness of soul. That's exhausting because it's never going to be enough. Never going to be enough. You're going to go do it, and then you're going to hope for the praise. It's never going to be enough. And so you can really wear yourself out doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting take on that question. For me, it's really about the busyness.
Yeah.
I'm finishing up my first year in retirement from my television news career, and there have been times when I didn't have as much to do as I had to do while I was still working at the television station and still here at Methodist Temple. And I feel guilty for not being busy. Like if I'm not being busy, that's just a waste of time. And I realize that's no good, but there's some force in me that says, well, get up and do something.
Well, yeah, because I mean, we live in this world where our value is determined by that which we produce.
Productivity.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, I am what I do, right? I mean, what makes me valuable? Well, what do you do? And if you can't do in that culture, then you're not valuable. And it's a sneaky thing that comes in there in terms of our motivation, and it comes in our hearts in terms of our motivation. So, yeah.
Here's another question. What background apps, worries, commitments, habits are draining my energy and keeping me from living at the pace of grace? How about you define pace of grace, and then we'll talk about that question.
Well, the pace of grace is connected to this idea that my life, your life, is connected to the greater life of Christ, and Christ's greater life is guiding us, sustaining us, with us, working to heal us, bring new life. All these kinds of things are happening. The tendency is to get in a hurry. Mm-hmm. We want the new life now. We want the healing now. And I think the biggest symptom of I've gotten in too big of a hurry is when we're going so fast that we forget about God altogether. Mm-hmm. And that certainly, I'll pick on the church here. We're really good at that during Advent. We can get so busy doing good things. I'm not trying to say it's bad for us to do some of the things we do during Advent, like going caroling or having cookie sales and these kinds of things. It's not bad. But if we jam-pack our schedules to the point where we're no longer thinking of God, we're no longer aware of Christ in our lives, then we're going too fast. We're outpacing grace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that analogy of the speed of grace and our speed. Mm-hmm. And, to use an old school, analog reference, I move at 78, revolutions per minute, and God doesn't move that fast. God moves more like a 45, right, on the record table, the turntable.
Yeah, this idea of the pace of grace is connected to hope. Yeah. What does it mean to live with hope? Well, spiritually speaking, hope is different than optimism. Optimism says, gee, boy, I hope things will all work out. And what we mean by that is like, I hope I get what I want. Mm-hmm. That's secular hope. A spiritual hope that's grounded in God's steadfast love is this idea that God's sustaining presence is with me. Mm-hmm. My hope is like a calm confidence in God's presence in my life. And even in the midst of difficulty, to have hope says, I know new life is going to come. I know God's presence is going to sustain me through this. My hope is grounded in God's steadfast grace and love in my life. And so to not outpace grace in this context would say, hey, I don't know how the new life's going to come. I don't know how things are necessarily going to work out here. But my hope is not in myself or in the events of my life, but it's in God's capacity to sustain.
Very good. What is one simple practice? Sleep, movement, quiet, nourishment, slowing down. Can I begin this week to cooperate with Christ's life being revealed in me? And we're back now to what we were talking about, the body. What we do with our bodies matters to our spiritual life.
I'll go back to the second question, then I'll go to the third question. So the background app in my life that keeps tripping me up is I stay up too late watching Hallmark Christmas movies.
You do not.
I do. I like them. And Leslie and I watch Hallmark Christmas movies. And
that's true confession here.
And then like it's 11 o'clock and then, the kids are still in school. So that means we're up early. And that by the time you get to Thursday, Friday, I'm just shot. And so that's one of my background apps. So if I could just go to bed an hour earlier, that would certainly help me. Now, back to the third question then, what's the simple practice? For me, like my home is the practice of contemplation. When I'm talking about contemplation, thinking about contemplation, finding my way back to silent prayer, this keeps me very grounded. And so that word contemplation is a churchy term. What do we mean? Well, that's a Christian form of meditation. That's what contemplation is. And the way I would describe it is like when you pray, you just try to be present to the presence of God and allow God's presence to silence the inner noise, to give a sense of peace. It's not like God's speaking in an audible way. It's not that we're even speaking to God in an audible way. We're just opening ourselves to the gift of God's sustaining love. If I can't create space in my life, Randy, for that sort of contemplative stance day to day for me, I really get out of rhythm, and I miss, I think, my call in that way.
Contemplative prayer is helped by something that you've already stated, and that is that Christ lives within us. Mm-hmm. And so I think prayer for a lot of people is an attempt to call God or call Christ in from somewhere else, and there seems like so much distance. And how can God really hear, well, it's because God is near.
Yeah.
And that's what contemplative prayer is about, is just resting with the reality that God is present. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's the theological point. We're moving towards Christmas. The theological point, the big one, is Emmanuel, God is with us. That's the theological point. So let me just kind of push some more on that. God joins us in the midst of creation so that we can see God joining us in the midst of creation. And there's this tendency we have to pray to use an analogy, the man upstairs. Mm-hmm. Where's God? Well, God's upstairs. God's up there. God's not right here.
Old man
upstairs, big beard, Santa Claus, that kind of thing. No, that's not God. Mm-hmm. God is a vulnerable child born to a teenage mother mm-hmm. in a broken world. That's God. Mm-hmm. That's God that's with us in the middle of the mess. That's God. Yeah. And contemplative prayer, when I'm recalling, what we're recalling, or any prayer for that matter, is I'm recalling the presence of love that's with me in the middle of the mess. I'm claiming the promise of incarnation. I'm claiming the promise of God's steadfast love. And that leads to another one of the Advent candles. When we claim that love, that leads to joy, Randy. What's joy? Well, it's not happiness. Spiritual joy is not happiness. It's not an emotion. It's the gladness that comes from knowing that God's sustaining love is there with us too, in the midst of whatever it is we're going through. It's claiming that awareness of that sustaining love. That creates a lightness of spirit for us when we're able to do that.
I want to drill down on joy here in a second, but before we get away from this third question, I wanted to say that for me, my sleep has been better since I retired. I didn't get enough sleep when I was still working at the television station, and I've noticed a difference. Movement, I could move more, but I'm aware of the need to move, and so, especially I'm getting up to to the age where I need to think about being able to move for many, many more years. Mm-hmm. Kind of a use it or lose it kind of a thing applies there.
Sure.
And so I am aware of the need to move. Nourishment, that could use some help, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
Lisa and I eat well. We eat some good stuff, but we eat some bad stuff.
Yeah.
Too.
I've been pounding some Christmas cookies.
Right. So quiet and slowing down. I too am a big proponent of contemplative prayer, but I don't do it as often as I should. Mm-hmm. But it is critical, and I think that's one of the things where you and I and the church needs to be helping our people appreciate it, because it doesn't seem like it's for everybody, because words have been so they've had so many prayers have had so many words, and to do a prayer without words is very hard for people.
It is, yeah. I mean, I go back to the prayer that I pray before every sermon almost every sermon I preach is I'll say, Lord, help us to be present to you even as you're here present with us. That's it in a nutshell. Not trying to think about God. I'm not trying to understand thoughts about God, beliefs about God. I'm just wanting to be aware of God. That's enough. And that can be done in a number of different ways. A worship service is contemplative to the extent it makes us aware of God's presence. Reading the scriptures is contemplative in the sense that makes us aware of God's presence. You read it in the presence of the one you believe inspired it. That's when you're really reading the Bible spiritually. You're not reading it for information. You're becoming aware of the presence that inspired it. And so, there's active ways to cultivate a sense of God's love and presence in our lives. Absolutely. But for some of us, the silence does help. So, absolutely.
Okay, let's come back to joy, because this is the week of joy in Advent. There's hope, there's peace, there's joy, there's love, then there's the Christ candle on Christmas Eve. So talk a little bit. I meant to look this up. Maybe you know. Do you know the history behind the Advent wreath? How did that get incorporated into the life of the church?
You talk about the pink candle now?
Well, I'm talking about in general.
Oh, in general.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have a history. I don't know that as necessarily. Obviously the Roman Catholic Church has Advent wreath, and then the Protestant Church and some of the more mainline Protestant churches, we've kept it. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it has some sort of connection to that older tradition that predates the Protestant tradition. So I do know, just historically speaking, when we talk about Advent, that Advent was a season kind of like Lent originally. And Lent, that's the season, that leads into Easter. In Lent, traditionally, people would fast. And then in Advent, there was a sense of sometimes fasting for Advent, too. We don't do that now, obviously, But when we get to that pink candle, that was a break in the fast. And that's why it was a joy Sunday. Like, we get a break, and Christmas is almost here and that kind of thing. And so, anyway, that's some of the history I do know.
And you see the transition in the color of the candles.
Yeah.
Some use blue candles to get away from this idea of a season of penitence to more of a joyful season of anticipation. And I used something last Sunday here at Methodist Temple when I was lighting the Advent wreath, that the joy is that, in this way of looking at it, both things are incorporated. There's penitence in the first couple of weeks of Advent, and then it breaks into joy with the third week, and that pink or rose candle. And I liked that. I think that's helpful.
Yeah. As you get closer, you should be becoming more joyful, and
there's more light.
There's more light. Yeah.
That's the other thing about the candles. There are no lights. Then there's one. Then
there's
light,
two. And it grows and it grows. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you already started to do this, but let's define joy. It is not synonymous with happiness.
Yeah, I wrote out a definition.
Okay.
I'll just read my definition. This is spiritual joy. It's different than happiness. It is a deep, steady gladness that arises from knowing you are not alone, that your life is held, loved, and sustained by God, even when circumstances remain difficult. That's how I would define spiritual joy. It's remembering that you are not alone. I've been thinking about salvation a little bit because this coming Sunday, Randy, the lesson I'm going to be talking about basically says Jesus is coming to save us from our sins. That's the lesson that I've kind of decided to focus on. What is salvation? Well, I like the idea of salvation being remembrance. Jesus says himself later on, not baby Jesus, but Jesus, towards the end of his life, his earthly life, he says, do this in remembrance. And so salvation is about remembering. It's about remembering you're held, that you're loved. And I would, dare I say, go as far to say that the gospel itself is remembering that you are the beloved of God. It's about coming back to who we truly are, that our value is not based upon what we do, that our value is not based upon what people say about us, that our value is not based upon how much money we have in our bank account. That's not where our value comes from. Our value comes from the infinite God of the universe saying, I love you. Mm-hmm. And you remember that. And that's salvation in a nutshell. And from that remembrance, it's like a ripple that echoes out, and it affects everyone that you meet, because that same love that holds you holds them too. And I mean, we're getting into more of the mystical type of branch of Christianity, but God bless the mystics. If we didn't have the mystics, we wouldn't know what to do. Honestly, from an experiential perspective, we'd be arguing over our words. I'm right, and here's why. I'm right, and here's why. No, you're loved, and here's why. Because God became one of us. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, and Jesus is our example. In all things, Jesus is our example, right? And he practiced this way.
Yes.
Yeah.
The baptism.
Mm-hmm.
The baptism itself.
Yeah.
Which we're jumping ahead. But, I mean, Jesus is born. We hear nothing from Jesus for 30 years, according to the Gospels. I mean, couple little things, but by and large, nothing. He emerges, is baptized. And as he's baptized, the voice says, you are my beloved. Mm-hmm. And then Jesus goes out and says, come follow me. And so he's training us now how to listen to the voice that calls us beloved too. Mm-hmm. That's discipleship. That's it. And I mean, if I could just convince people of one thing, Randy, it would be two things. Sorry, two things. God is real. God, it really is real. But not only is God real, God loves us. And just think about that. Just hold that. All of a sudden, the world becomes a safe place. All of a sudden, my problems don't have the final word. All of a sudden, I don't know how, but I sort of love my enemy. All of a sudden, things begin to change and shift. That basic posture, this is discipleship. This is it. And so as the candles grow in their light, we are meant to grow in that light too.
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right, let's leave the folks with some practical wisdom here, because we want to come back to this connection between body and spirit, because there's really no dualism there. It's all one thing, really. And so the body does make a difference to our spiritual life. And so we laid out these 5 things. Consistent sleep, we've talked about it, but consistent sleep. And what I want you to think about is if you do these things, it'll be good for your spirit. Not only good for your body, good for your spirit. Consistent sleep, daily movement, 10 minutes a day of quiet, nourishment, more water, less sugar, and don't outpace the gift of grace. Mm. Do those things, I think we see a difference in the health of our entire being, body and spirit.
Yeah. If I could focus on one this week, I mean, it's going to be hard to do the whole list, obviously, especially with Christmas just being around the corner. I would just tell folks, slow down. Yeah. I did this the other day when I was working on this sermon. I came home, and usually I'm a frenzy at home, just picking up the kitchen, getting the girls ready, getting the homework ready, getting the backpacks put up. I mean, go, bath time, all this stuff. And one night in particular, I can remember I came home after thinking about don't outpace the gift of grace. I decided I'm going to try to slow down to the point where I don't forget about God in my life. And here's the odd thing I noticed. I continued to do all the things I just mentioned, but I went about them in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I would dare I say, I think I got more done, actually.
That's the gift of contemplative prayer. It's not the 20-minute sit. It is, but it isn't, because you'll feel that, you'll have that attitude 24/7 if you get practiced at that. I think that's what you were describing.
Yeah, a contemplative posture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, very good. Where we are closing in on Christmas, and I know you all are just as busy as we are. So our prayer for you this week is that you'll be able to slow down just a little bit and then enjoy Christmas for all it's worth. We appreciate you watching the podcast. Thank you so much. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy. We hope you'll join us next week. We see Christ in you.